Hello, good morning. It's me again, ArtCat. My name's Lee Boyd. If you haven't watched this before, well, hopefully some of you have. Got 5 views already. You must be waiting in the background. Good to see you. I'm just going to open my screens. So I'm going live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch all at the same time. So yes, if you do want to drop in and say hello, you can do. You can ask any art-related questions you want to. And so yeah, let's kick it off. As you can see, there's a slight delay as well, so apologies if this is a little bit out of sync, or if you do type something and it takes me a little while to get to you. A slight delay between all the different stream formats, so there's like 3 or 4 different screens all doing the same thing, slightly behind each other. I've got the drawing that I did last Sunday of Portrait Artist of the Week that is aired on Sunday mornings at 10 AM GMT, British Greenwich Mean Time. And it's on their Sky TV Facebook page. It is the Portrait Artist of the Year program, and basically they run a weekly session, or they will be running a weekly session for the next 7 weeks. We've done 2 weeks already. First one was Nicola Coughlin, and the second one was Clive Murray. So I did this on Sunday live. I streamed it on Twitch, and I streamed for about 6 hours. Now the portrait took about just under 5. I edited it all down. I haven't quite got that footage ready to show you in its nice compact 1-minute version, because it's much easier to watch than watching several hours. But it was good. It was good. It's a good process to do. I'm sort of finding out a lot of my process by watching a time lapse, which is using modern media to kind of adjust your approach to things. To see how I'm kind of areas of the portrait that you kind of struggle with, things and mistakes you make and you have to rectify, and kind of sitting back and reviewing it objectively, and it's really helped me kind of hone down what I'd like to put in my artwork and what works, what doesn't work, etc. So if you have anything you want to say art related wise, I'm going to be working on a painting today, not a drawing. Bit of a shock. So yeah, I did that in about just under 5 hours. Ideally I was trying to do it in 4. It was just a slow going day for me. I was just taking my time with it, which is okay. The premise is that you have the rest of the week to do your artwork, and you can upload it to Instagram using the hashtag myPAOTW. So if you go to Instagram and look for that hashtag, you will see 40,000 portraits done from several. This is like season 3. And it was good. I enjoyed the process of it. It was nice listening to the conversation between the artist, who from a previous episode, and the sitter, and that kind of conversation can really kind of inform what it is you want to do in your portrait as well. Edits about what it is you want to leave in, what it is you want to take out. Process wise, what do you think is going to be best mediums to use and your approach to it, those types of things. I used charcoal for this particular portrait, so I will have a time lapse up of this at some stage, and I will get that up during the week. But over the last few weeks, I don't even know how many, I'm losing track of how many art cats we've done. I was working on Andrea, and this is it. It was finished. I did a stream last week refining some of the details in it. I was gonna just do it off screen and just have it there to show you and do the painting last week, but I decided no, I will try and fine tune how I come to the completion of a picture live on screen. Now, even in those 2 hours, did an awful lot of chatting and talking and not much drawing, so it wasn't quite complete at the end. So I did spend that time. It was kind of the same process that I took that I did, and just refined it. I had a bit more of the hair to do at the top, which I've done, and I did stream a little bit of this live on Twitch as I did it. So I don't know if you caught that. If you are on Twitch, you can recap over the end of the portrait, and I just put through some of the final flurries. So. And I was taking photographs on my phone and flipping them upside down to see really objectively and to see how the tones worked and see how the textures worked with each other. So I think I've got to a stage now I wouldn't want to do any more to it. so I was quite happy with it. You can take a little zoom in to some of the details on there, so you can see some of the finer details of these wispy bits of hair over the top, and literally just took the pencil eraser, the mono eraser, and just rubbed through the charcoal to get that kind of very light dusting of hair of going over her shoulder. So that was that one done. As you can see on her badge, I stop zooming in out so much, you can see on her badge it's got love, and I love Andrea, but some of the details in it are so subtle that you don't necessarily have to recognize them from a distance. I think when you're doing well, for me personally, when I'm doing a portrait, there's some added input into the pictorial content of what you're looking at. Has to hold a particular interest from me. It's not just creating a thing and doing a copy of a photograph. There's elements within that you can edit out. I mean, I didn't draw every stitch of her, or put every little bit of zip in of a jacket and things like that, but there's elements that I wanted to just have there quite quietly, quite subtly, and put into the artwork. So that's that one done. And today I'm going to, as I said, I'm going to carry on with a portrait that I have been painting for quite a while, and it's part of an ongoing process. I'm going to take Andrea off the board, try not to drop her into the paint. There we go. Set it down there. And I'm working on this one. Now, some of you may have seen this already. I was working on hands a while back and highlighting some details on little elements of the painting, because there's an orangutan. I might try and zoom out a little bit more just so you can get to see the entirety of that. So as I said, there's a slight skewing of the image because you're looking at it from an angle. So yeah. So if you have any questions at all art related about what we're doing, pop them up in a chat bar. If you're on Facebook, Twitch or YouTube, you can jump in. So it's good to have the conversation. Makes this time an awful lot easier. But as I said, I'm working on painting today, so this is my kind of discovery stage. I'm still trying to figure out what it is I need to do. Now you see in my reference on my screen here, I'm looking at armor, suits of armor, and there's a particular style of armor, very ornate blue steel armor. It's got a lovely rich quality to it, and it was very ornate, and there was some elements of it that I kind of liked how the light hit it. So I'm looking at references. Now this armor isn't the same as this armor. I'm not copying this armor. What I'm taking from it is how light hits it, and it was something I was going to work on today. I've got my palette just down here in the bottom corner, so I'm going to take a little bit of a risk, loosen the camera up and do a pan down there. You see my palette, how I've got it all set up. Now I'll take a little bit of a walk through. Sorry, it's just a weird angle. This that I've got as my palette table itself is, well, you know, they get on those nest of tables that you find in most charity shops. I've actually I acquired one of those quite inexpensively. I thought this is actually a brilliant palette because it's got a glass top, toughened glass, and normally you get that leatherette stuff underneath it. I just lifted the glass bit up and slipped a piece of grey paper and put the glass table back down, and it's a brilliant surface to work on. It's really worked well. The reason why I'm using grey is there's a nice mid-tone, so when you're working out tones in your colours, it's easy to see whether the tone is too light or too dark because of the mid-tone. And I've set my paints out in a nice format that I've got my whites and my yellows, my browns, my reds, my blues. I have got a touch of black, but I probably won't be using it. I'll move my knee out of the way. Probably can see it a little bit better. There, so wait for the camera. There we go. My leg's still in the way. Hang on. Let me adjust my position so you can see it. I've also got my so yeah, there's a little tiny bit of black there. I probably won't use it. It's to just help me tone down colours. I try not to use blacks or whites to lighten or darken colours. I try to use keep the chroma in the colour and to use that. So, but I can take you through a quick walk around my colours that I have. I have an ultramarine blue. I have a phthalo blue. I have a Brazilian crimson. I have a cadmium red. I have a burnt umber. I have a raw sienna, a cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, a Naples yellow, and off yellow by Michael Harding, which is quite nice because I think sometimes titanium white is just too strong. It's there again, like my black. I can kind of use it if I need to, but it's not necessarily. I won't use, say, mix up a color and then use white to lighten it. I'll try and mix up a lighter version of that color to lighten it. So I might use white to mix up a separate color and then use a color to lighten my blue, for example. So I don't tend to use the white directly in the painting. So if anything, say some of the highlights that you might see on the armor itself aren't pure white. They're the lightest version of the thing itself. So I'm trying not to use such a bold starkness. I'm trying to get it really soft and almost quite to try and give it a calm feeling. Now, this is still very much an underpainting. I had this painted out and drawn out a good while back now, and part of a series of work called Mammalian, which is a series of portraits based on a group of people I've known over the last 10 years. Sat down, interviewed them, well, say interviewed them, just had a chat and a coffee with them, and I decided I would base the portrait around that conversation or elements from it. And it could be things that we talked about or how people actually were physically, and pull in different elements for different portraits and try and get a capture of them as their personality rather than just their likeness. There is an element of likeness in it. Now, the only question I asked them throughout all of this was if they could describe themselves as an animal, what would it be? And so I would use their description of themselves as that animal and put that animal in the picture as well. So I was trying to get this is the conceptual side of it, a conceived idea about that personality, snapshot of them on that day, of that time, and take that into a picture. Now, the imagery is surrealistic in a way, but I don't necessarily see it as in the Dali-esque version of surreality, so you know, this kind of free-floating consciousness, because I'm still curating it, so I don't know if the surrealism, somebody said it was imaginative realism, but I'm not so focused on detail of realism. It's more representationalism. So imaginative representationalism. If you want to find an ism for it, you don't have to. You can create your work and just leave it as your work and move on to the next painting and let everybody else try and figure out what the box is that they kind of slot you into, because it's different for different people. So yeah, so that's what I'm working on today. So that's a little skip around the palette. In the painting mediums I've got a Zestit. So Zestit's like a low odorless mineral spirit, so it's not terps. Don't use terps. It's quite a corrosive material. The odors from it as well, quite powerful. I'm in a small confined space, so it doesn't really work well for me. And with that, I'm using some it's a bit of a mix between that linseed oil and the Zestit as well, just to create like a painting medium. So it's got a little bit of oily consistency to it, so it's not stripping the paint like the just pure Zestit. Or you can use Sandor as well. Sandor is a mineral spirit, but to paint with, it is a mix of linseed oil and the mineral spirit, and it just gives a nice fluidity to the paint, so I don't have to struggle around with putting the paint on. I just want to put the paint on and think about the painting itself. and that's how I'm going to work on it. So I don't know if you have any questions. Again, if you are watching us live, you can ask any questions, fire them up there. You can talk about the artwork that you're doing, artwork in general, things in general. So we're sat here for the next couple of hours. I'm working on those. I've got a range of brushes that are kind of, I don't know how you work. I kind of have different brushes for different things, and this is kind of my my pencil range of brushes that I'm kind of figuring out where things are and what colours are and what density of things I should do. And so the way I paint is kind of partly intuitive, partly constructed because I've figured out what it is I'm going to do, but part of it is observing constantly about what it is I need to do and shape and change, so things will still move around. To keep the flexibility in the painting is really important for me in my process. Some people like to have everything nailed down and planned before they start, and it's just a different way of working. I have an idea conceptually about what it is I want to do. I have an idea about the pictorial content. Obviously this is a friend, it's a suit of armour, there's an orangutan, so there's certain elements, the hands, etc. But there's things I can change about how I think about light and think about colour and think about textures and about how those things sort of play together, and then stand back and look at the overall image and see how that all comes together. And part of that, you got to kind of navigate your way through it. You've got to kind of look for what works, what doesn't work. So I'll take you back up. Yeah, there we go. That's it. Just wait for all the screens to capture before I tighten that fully. Yeah, I think it's about right. Maybe about there. Can you all see that? Try to get in as much of the portrait as possible from top to bottom. So a lot of the sketching initially I literally just used a bit of raw umber, stained the canvas, so I had a bit of like a wash of burnt umber on it, rubbed all that down with a cloth just to break away the white, so I wasn't staring at colours on a white background. So often when you buy canvases, you're just looking at a white canvas, and any colour or mark you make on that really sort of pops off the page, or can get swamped by the whiteness of the canvas. So kind of tone the canvas down for me personally just helps me just see that colour by itself. That mid-tone colour wash of the umber on the background is just there to start to see where the picture is, see where the painting is. And constructive wise, it felt like drawing with paint, so I literally was working out, the angle of the head, roughly where the body would come, how I was going to move in the arms, and once I've got down the basic structure of something, that's when I can start to fill in the paint. Now, when I was doing this painting, I left it for quite a while. I got to a stage where I was starting to work on these paintings. I kind of finished one. I worked on two others. One behind me here is another one I'm working on, and then I stopped because I was looking at the quality of my painting and going, my quality of my painting is not quite there yet. So I've quietly been practicing, learning and researching and picking up tips and just looking at how other painters were painting and using that kind of process of looking through contemporary painters and looking through old art books of historical painters and looking to see how they handle paint. What did they do in their painting that gave it that didn't take away from the narrative of the picture but added to it? And I knew at that point there's elements in my painting which was very naive, and it still is to a certain extent. I mean, my background is in fine craft design. I went to art college. I went through all the process of the O-level art back in my day, A-level art, and doing a foundation course and going to university and studying there. But that's not just the end of my art education. When I left art for about 15 years after that. But when I came back to art, I realised that I was really teaching myself artistically what it was I wanted to say and do in my artwork. and that takes you to kind of feed it. And what I mean by that is going off and having a look about what's around you and what you like and what you don't like. So artistically, when you're having a look out there in the art world, you can see a painting or see a performance or hear a piece of music that is in front of you. You go, you have an instinctive affinity to it, I like it, or a reaction to it, you go, I don't like it. And for me, what I do at that point is I ask myself, what is it about it I like and don't like? And that's the important step. It's that investment of your inquisitiveness kind of feeds you artistically. So when you go and have a look at art on Instagram and you're scrolling through all the pages and you see something you like and you want to press the like button and then just sit with it for a couple of minutes and just think, what is it about that I like? Is it the colours they've used? Is it the composition that they've played around with? Is, you know, how they've got their brush strokes to work with them, the texture that they've built up, the illusionary element of the picture that they've created. What is it about it that I like? And it's good to have that instinct, but if you're wanting to fine-tune your own artwork, it kind of helps you see your artwork objectively. This is like a practice. It's a tip for you guys to say, when you're looking at your artwork and you don't know quite what's wrong with it, when you look at somebody else's artwork, what is it you like and don't like about it? What is it that you think, oh, that works, or oh, that doesn't work, and that kind of is distracting? What is it about it? Because it helps you reflect back onto your own work, so you see your artwork objectively. There's lots of tips and tricks you can do. You can turn your artwork upside down, you can take a photograph of it on a phone, you can go away and have a break, but it's when you come back to it, or when you look at it in an obscure fashion like it's being turned upside down, what is it you're looking at? What is it you can see that you need to change and tweak? How do you need to resolve those things? And you could start creating like a personal shopping list, a thing about what it is you can change and things that you like to improve. Sometimes it means you've got to flip over a page or grab a new canvas and revisit the image. Sometimes you've got to work through the painting, and this is what I'm doing with the right, it's rubbish and chucking it away. It's to sit and look and think about it and go, that's not quite right, I need to learn how to do that. I need to go off and find out. So you go off and watch YouTube videos and watch other artists' work and from live feeds, and you listen to art conversations, and you go and look at art and you go, oh, that's the element that I liked about his work or her work that I really have an affinity with, and some of that is what I'm trying to pull into my work. So you can cherry pick elements from different influences and pull them into your work. Some of it might be technical, it might not be about the pictorial content that you like, it might be just technically how somebody's painted something. It might be artistic, the voice of the artist and how they're expressing something, and you don't necessarily like the colours that they've used or the technique of the brushwork, but the conceptual side of it you like. Take those as a little bit of a guide. It just helps you, they're like little signposts about your own little route, about how you find the way to create the artwork that you like. Sometimes works, sometimes it is a trial and error, and there's a lot of error involved with the process, so you know it can be a bit of a journey that way. Alex, you're over there on YouTube, hello, good morning to you. Michael as well, good morning. Andrew's picture is fantastic, doing a portrait at the moment, cool. The head is tilted looking upwards, finding the proportions size-wise a bit difficult, but still using HB charcoal so I can rub it out. Okay, brilliant. Again, it's about finding out, if you're shifting things around and moving them, how what you think an eye looks like suddenly doesn't look like an eye, because it's squished down because it's foreshortened, and you know how light it hits it. So yeah, it's good. It is a case of just constantly moving things around until it settles and you visually know it's right. So Alex, you're saying, you see I have a wee trowel, but is that just a mixture and then use a brush? Yeah, I generally will mix with a palette rather than just a brush, because I like to keep my brushes for the painting so it keeps them nice and clean. I don't try and sort of dip the same brush into different paint and then put it on. It's just so I'm being a little bit. In a way, I'm kind of slowing myself down and trying to find a process that gives me the colours that I want. Because often when you mix up a colour on your palette, you're going to put it on your painting. It suddenly sits with lots of other colour and information around it that where you think it is the right tone or is the right colour, you put it on and go, oh no, that immediately needs to be darker or lighter, say for example. We'll try and get close, and you can get things like colour checkers. I've seen these little things. They look like guns, and they've got a little tiny, it's almost like a ring, like an eyelet to look through. And you look through that, and you see a little tiny trowel on the end. And basically, you can hold it up against your picture, and you can hold, say for example, that's loaded with colour. You can look through the little hole and see your picture beside it, and mix your colour up and paint the trowel bit and hold that up against your picture to see if it's the right tone or not. Because you've seen this colour on your trowel next to your image, and you can kind of check it like that. And if it's too dark or too light, you can change it before you actually put it on the painting. Now, I just find that it's a good technique and it's very methodical. I just find that gets in a way of my process about just painting. I want to paint, so I'm slowing myself down, but maybe not enough. So I am kind of discovering my paints again, and this is all self-taught. There isn't any formal art education that's taught me how to paint. There's very little formal art education that's taught me how to draw. It's a process of learning as you go on. It's a case of they give me some good foundation basics in art college, and it's what you do with it from there, because there isn't a tutor behind you telling you maybe what you can and can't do, or how you should maybe approach things, or an objective point of view that you can ignore and do your own thing. Finding that process is a practice that you kind of have to keep trying out. Angela as well, good morning, good afternoon even. I keep saying good morning. I've been up for quite a few hours already, so it's almost like good evening for me. So again, yeah, my portrait isn't the same as my reference. What I'm doing is taking qualities of my reference and pulling them into this, and part of it is how armor looks in this particular light. Now my background is an awful lot darker, so some of these edges that I've got around the armor are going to disappear out the back. The direction of the light is not going to be maybe as harsh as this, but I can see the forms that the armor is taking. I can see how the colors are starting to work, how these break down into the blues. Remember I was saying this is a particular blue steel armor. It's more ornate, so it wouldn't have necessarily been used on the battlefield. It would have been more ceremonial, and it's kind of an element I wanted to bring in. This isn't a warrior fighting. This is a little bit more I want to give it a slightly softer feel, but there's still a strength to it, if that makes sense. So again, this is how I'm mixing my concept with the references that I'm using, and then play around with the colour. Now when I say blue steel, it's often that you want to just jump straight in and get blue and put blue on there, but it's the qualities of the colours that are built into this. So I'm seeing lots of browns, there's some yellows, some little bits of touches of green here and there. And if you're wondering how you see colours in something, often the tip is to get a hole punch and punch it into a piece of paper, and go to your reference and put that hole over an element of your reference. So say for example this arm here, and just isolate it, just isolate the colour, and just move it around your image so you can start to see what colours might be involved in creating the illusion of a blue steel armor. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Also with this, it's because it's a reference picture, I'm dealing with the camera that it was taken on, and it might affect colours and things like that. So you can kind of tweak it a bit, but when I start painting this has to have a cohesiveness with it, kind of a rule-based it creates its own kind of rule guide about colours, that where colours work and where they don't work, and how they, if I start just putting, say, pink on these, it's going to have a knock-on effect to other areas of itself. So what I mean by that, for example, this little bit of shoulder here, if I made this all pink, because it goes dark and reflects light back onto itself, or reflects the surrounding area onto it, it will change the colour of it as well. So pink won't be just pink, it'll have a slight darkness to it and a slight lightness to it, and a reflected light onto it as well from the objects that are around it. Other elements that are held around it, so things like an orange orangutan might have an effect on the colour. So where this is blue, it will start to pick up elements reflected back off the orangutan that's been held in the hands. The hands themselves will have a reflected light onto the image, because this is a reflective surface. Excuse me. So I've got to think about those types of elements as well, and it's just to help create that illusion of reality that doesn't exist. And this is where that kind of imaginative realism comes in, where there is no photograph of my friend holding an orangutan in a suit of armour. I'm creating that, but the rules of armour and light and textures will help give me the illusion of it, if that makes sense. It's a very long-winded explanation, wasn't it? But that's where I'm at. So today, when I was kind of sitting back and looking at it, I was thinking, I could maybe do the orangutan, or I could do a face, or I could do a hands. I did a hands a while back, and I just changed them around a little bit because I wasn't quite happy with where they were sat. I wanted to feel like it was slightly more cupping the orangutan, and then they were actually physically sat on them. And the hands I had, they didn't quite work; they looked a bit clunky. So I thought I'd work on the armour, a little bit on the armour, and to work on it in a section rather than trying to work on it as a whole. A move help me if I get the rule-based system for this armour built up for an element of our armour, I can use it to tweak and manipulate as I go along, because I'll know through experience about mixing up the colours and trial and testing them what works, what doesn't work. So it is a very explorative way of painting. It's very kind of a paint response type of way of process, rather than having it all planned out, knowing that that's going to be blue, that's going to be yellow, going to be pink. I'm kind of discovering it myself. The reason why I'm going to use this shape is it's more simplified. It's got a lovely dome to it, so I can go from a light to a dark, or a dark to a light to a dark to a reflected light. So it's got lots of elements in there. It's quite a simplified shape, so it's got a consistency about it goes over this way as well as goes around that way. So I've got form that I need to think about, and then with that three-dimensionality of form, I can then add it to other elements on it, on the armour. I looked at lots of different suits of armour and how they were constructed and what elements need to move, and sort of the animation of it, what certain things are. There's the little discs on the side are actually like elbow protectors, because this part around the cuff of a forearm and going around the bicep of the upper arm, these are separate, they're not joined, they're not hinged, and when they're strapped together they leave a little bit of a gap on the outside of the elbow. Now that needs protecting, so these have these like little discs which you were able to strap on. On this one it's actually riveted, so all of these things are a bit like the Tin Man from the Wizard of Oz, and if you could see how he kind of moved his arms, they all had to kind of move around each other. There's sort of almost engineering involved with it, and how the rivets worked as well, and then how they were strapped up. You can see here just on the reference, it's kind of cut away just on this bit, and you've got this strange little bit just above it. Now I've not put that in this picture. I've tried to simplify it down a little bit by just having elements about what was going to cover that elbow. So to me this kind of comes under the forearm here and cuts away, so you've got a way of moving the arm. Now, elements that you can't see in the picture, you still have to think about, because it can inform how the rest of the shape is. This is going to sit under here. It's like a cup that fits onto the arm and ties at the back like a hinge. This is tied into place. It sits over both the breastplate and covers this top of the arm here. This part of the armor would stop about here, sort of cutting down that way. So this has to sit over the top of it, so it's going to be slightly big. It starts to build out the figurative form, so I can't work on just purely the anatomy of a human. I can work on that fitting to the anatomy of a human, how wide her shoulders are going to be, how long her arms are going to be, but it bulks it out in certain ways. There's elements here underneath that I'm not quite too sure about yet. Her arms are slightly forward, and at the minute it looks like that is her body shape, and it's not. This has to sit in front of her arms. Her arms are slightly moved forward because she's holding an orangutan. She's holding it here. It will push it back. So I need to think about lights and darks in this bit, but to figure all that out, this is what I'm going to work on today. So hopefully that all makes sense. So we'll have a time lapse of the drawing of Clive Marie. I'll try and I started editing it all down. There's lots of breaks I took in between, so again, interesting process from going from sort of a 6.5 hour live stream to editing out all those breaks and bits of me chatting to me actually doing the physical drawing. How much time I've spent just looking at what it was I was doing, and that is a part of your process. So again, it's on tomorrow at 10 AM, so I'll be doing that. I'll start painting with this now, and I know I need some darker tones and some light tones and the ranges in between. I'm going to start off with this phthalo blue, and it is kind of more of a transparency blue. It's very vivid, and this is slightly darker, so I want to darken this down a little bit. So I'm just giving myself a little bit of paint on my easel. I don't know whether you want to see that. I might as well see that. Ooh, try to zoom back out. You can see how dark it is on my palette as a blue, but it's got a translucency to it. Nice thing about oil paint, it is translucent, and you can see through colours. It depends on the pigment and the type of paint it is as well. Some are more translucent than others. I'll just kind of give myself a nice base to work on, and then I'm going to start mixing up the colours on here. There's definitely some browns pulled in, so I'm going to take some of the alizarin crimson and some burnt umber, and start mixing that in with it as well, just to give me a darker tone of blue. It adds a slight, because there's a slight yellowness to that burnt umber as well, mixed in with the blue, gives you a slight greeniness. But there's a density to it which is quite nice. And maybe just a bit, warm it up a little bit. I'll stick some cadmium red in it. Now, there's painters from all around the world who are amazing, who'll be looking at me going, Lee, what are you doing with your colours? This is me just discovering them. I'm trying to figure them out, what works, what doesn't work for this particular picture. And it's instinctive, what I like visually, which might not be the same as what a rule book tells you to do. So I'm on that kind of discovery process of finding out what works, what doesn't work. I might bring some of that ultramarine in, which is a much denser blue. Maybe looking a little bit brown at the moment. I'll bring a little bit more of that in. I'm mixing them together with a power knife, squishing them out, squishing them flat, scraping it all back up together. One of the things I noticed from painters that I was kind of admiring is how clean they kept their palette surface. Now I've got plenty of palettes around which are a complete mess because the colours are everywhere, and you can see how much searching I was doing for a colour, but I was often causing myself more problems by not working in a slightly more methodical way to save myself time, so working smarter and not harder. So yeah, I've got a little bit of density to that colour now. It looks quite black on your screen, but there's still quite a brownness to it, a darker brown, which I think I can really darken back up again. So I'm going to use a little bit more of that ultramarine because I think that really gave a blue to it. I'm going to lighten it with a little bit with the phthalo blue, which is very intense, got a high chroma, but it's more iridescent. It's kind of like small see-through. So that becomes this richer, darker bluey black that I'm looking for. Again, I'm not using black here. I've just got it occasionally if I see something that's so dark, I can use it just to play with a colour. A little bit of that out, so phthalo blue, just to give the bluiness to it, the bluey browny black. And that's how I kind of find my colours visually, what I look at. I can take a bit of this just over to the side, maybe move that up a little bit, just over to the side. So that's that colour, and play around with elements in it and darken and lighten it. Now you can notice this is all before I've gone to the picture itself. Clean it up. You see how messy I am doing this. What I can do is just clean off. Always having good old rags helps. So I don't want to get that mixed in with the rest of my other colours. Give me a bit as well. Alex, you're asking over on YouTube. So if you only do a big painting in sections, how do you not have to mix a big pot of some colours so it matches future sections when you get there? If you see what I mean? Yeah, it's like painting a room. If you paint one wall with a small pot, and then you go, oh, I've got 3 more walls to paint. I have to go and get more paint. Will I get the right colour? I forgot what it was called. This is more instinctive, so I'm kind of building up my kind of rule-based system about what the rest of the painting is going to be, and it will change as you navigate across it. This side is slightly darker than this side, so there might be other colours I start to apply to this. But because I've got, this is the same palette I kind of use most of the time. It's just a palette range that works for me. I'm not using every colour under the sun. That I can recreate this colour whenever I want, and that's part of the process that I was trying to get to. Is that I was constantly mixing up a colour and not knowing how I got there. But when I've got a limited colour palette in front of me, I know that there is only 2 blues that I used. I haven't gone to the shop and found the perfect blue with the perfect tube. It can be a very expensive way of painting, doing that, or when you go into there and there isn't the range, there's a whole range of blue colours, and there might not be the perfect blue for you. And if you don't figure out how to mix up your own colours, it can be quite frustrating. So I know working out my palette and what can work for me, about what I can then do to the colour to make it lighter, to make it darker. If I just add a little bit of an experiment today, and I think most paintings are a sense of discovery. They're a way of learning what that painting needs, rather than going, oh no, I'm just going to paint that blue, I'm just going to paint this pink, I'm just going to paint that orange. You can work like that, and it can create some wonderful artworks like that, but for me, I kind of like that discovery. Acrylics would dry out, for example. Yeah, but I mean, there's a way of extending the drying time of acrylics. You can use a water-based gel instead of water, which can take longer to dry out. There's extenders you can use. There's extenders you can use for oil paints. There's dry mediums you can use for oil paints. There is water-based oil paints which dry quicker. I just like the flexibility, the fact I can move and shift, and it's a flexibility of having pencils where you can just rub them out and draw, but you have to draw lightly. Do you see what I mean? So with me, for oils, they've scared off a lot of people, but you shouldn't be scared of them because they are an easy medium to use. It's because we think, oh, they're very expensive, and we shouldn't be wasting loads of money on paint. And when I don't know how to paint, I learn how to paint in acrylics. But acrylics is as different as to drawing with a crayon as it is to a pencil. Still drawing, but the mediums are different, and therefore, if you find the strengths in what you can do with acrylics, you got to move to oils, and then suddenly you're finding out that they do certain different things. For example, with acrylics, they dry a slightly different color. They have a slightly more almost plasticky type of finish to the paint as well, so it reflects its own light. It's got like a sheen on it. But you can again find mediums that mats it down. There's an extremity of loads of different stuff you can add to paints as mediums and things that can work in lots of different ways, and the combination of them are going to the billions. What I suggested is, if you have a slightly more limited palette to begin with and learn how to mix the colours up you want, then finding the right colour for your picture is the thing that you're trying to do, to create the illusion of tone or how something changes, or textures are mark making. So textures comes into what type of brushes you use, and the mark making process that you use. You dab it on, or do you scrub it on, or do you lightly layer it on in layers and build up a translucency and get a warmth and a fluidity to the paint. They all have their merit and they all have their reason to use, but you can choose. You're the artist and you choose what it is you like to do. So there's a lot of experimentation, a lot of trial, a lot of putting things on and going, oh, that doesn't work, that needs to be darker, this needs to be lighter. I'm going to take a little bit of an experiment. If I zoom in on this palette a little bit, maybe I should have done this around the other way, and maybe if I move this a little bit closer and move that down a little bit more. You get to see more of this palette today, and then when I start painting I'll try and remember to shift it back up. Here we go. You see that okay? Let's wait for these other cameras to catch up to itself. So yeah, for acrylics, they dry a slightly different colour, like tonally, a slightly different colour than when they're wet. To keep the fluidity in the paint, you can use water-based lubricant instead of water. I saw that from a guy that had a TV program on ages ago who used to be a forger, and he mixed his acrylic painting with all sorts of stuff, from household paint to he just mixed loads of different colours together. With oils, different brands have different consistencies because of the content of the pigment that's in them. I always try to suggest, don't necessarily buy just the cheapest oil paint, not because it's cheap, but generally there's not an awful lot of pigment in it, and there's an awful lot of filler. And we start to mix or try and get the colours that you want. You have to use more colour of it to get the intensity of the colour to come out. So I mean, you can start off with Winsor & Newton student range, but I say you take a step up from there and use just the Winsor & Newton range of paints. I use Michael Hardin. So for example, this would be the Artist's Watercolour by Winsor & Newton, and I use paint by Michael Harding, and there's lots of other brands you can try out there as well. I'm not saying that they're just solely the ones I use. The cheaper ones that I've got, there's one that I've got here. Yeah, this is like the Winton colour. This is like the student range. They're not as heavily like filled. They've got safflower oil in it, and the intensity is not as strong, so I have to use more of it if I was going to use that. Whereas I'm just trying to see what oil is in the back of that one. They all have lots of information on the back of each paint. Let me see, because I painted over it. Lots of information on the back of paints to tell you what they've been mixed with, and it tells you the drying times as well. For the Michael Hardin, it dries quite quickly. The light fastness is excellent. Its tint power is average. So there's lots of information on the back of, let me see that, on the back of the paint tubes. When you're looking at a colour, don't just think, oh, that's the blue, and pick it up and use that. Look at the information on the back of it, because it will tell you, you know, what it's really good at. So if you're wanting to subtly tint something, the Raw Umber by Michael Hardin might be the one to go for. If it's very, very strong and you're using a large area, you might go, do you know what, it's kind of an average tint power. I might want to find a paint that has a strong tint power, because I will have to use less paint. And that's not just for coverage. I mean, that's just the how much you're going to have to use to actually change the colour of the paint you're going to put on your painting. Let's see what its base is. Has it got on here? No, it's got on the front. So this has got linseed oil in it. So again, it's going to have a different flow to it. Synthetic iron oxide ground in linseed oil. So you can get lots of information off your paint tubes themselves, which are going to help you. But it's just trying to break that down. And if you're unsure about it, you know, there's plenty of really good books about the different materials you can look at. Now it is a bit of a minefield when you're sort of thrust into an art shop and go, well, you want to be an artist, go and do some art. There's all the stuff, and you go, yeah, but say, even if pencils, what pencil do I use? I don't know whether to use a 9B or a 9H. There's just so many of them. Which one would you choose? It's a case of starting with a core range of them and then adding to it or subtracting from what works for you. The brushes that I use are mostly synthetic. There's some lovely qualities about hog hair brushes and about natural brushes and things. For some elements they work great. For other elements I can't get the finesse that I want to the mark making, so I have to be selective. So I'm constantly, I've got loads of brushes, and then I kind of look at the brush and go, is that going to work for me? And I kind of feel the quality of the brush itself and how it bounces on the canvas and how it moves. Some I need to scrub. Sometimes I need to scrub the paint on. Sometimes I need to just like allow the paint to flow off the brush. Different brushes are going to do different things for you. So it's about the selectivity of that. Getting back to the paint. I'm going to mix this bit up 3 different times, and I'm going to use a little tiny section at a time just to show you the difference in what can change a colour. This is the Michael Harding. It's kind of like an off-white. It's not perfect white. I'm just trying to find this tube. The Winsor & Newton titanium white is a really nice white to use because it is solid and it holds its whiteness. Some of the other whites are a little bit too translucent for me. And I say I don't use white directly on the page, but I do use it to lighten colours. So I want a consistency to it. Oh, can't find that. The other thing is get bigger paint books. I've seen some brilliant things recently online. Oh, there it's hiding in the corner. So you got a lovely close up of my shoulder there, where they've used bulldog clips on a board, and they hang the bulldog clip on the end of the paint tube, and they hang the paint tubes up next to the palette, which seems really functional, and it's something I'm actually thinking about doing myself. This is what they call a warm white. It's a lead white alternative by Michael Harding, as opposed to titanium white. It's just a slightly warmer colour to it rather than this like bright white. So I'm going to mix up. I'm going to put that whole lot on. I'm just going to use a small little touch and add that to that blue, and you can see already how powerful that is in changing its tone. It's got a slight warm lilac type of feel to it. If we do the same again, lost my rag. My rag was lost. I wonder if that's where the term came from for most artists, where they've just lost their rag, got angry. But I literally have just lost my rag because it fell over the back of my palette. I can't grab it and retrieve it right now. I'm going to use another little bit just here, and this time I'm going to add some of this white, which is it's actually Michael Harding's titanium white, so it's a little bit more translucent than the Winsor & Newton version. Again, I'm not going to put all that on there because it'll be too much, so I'm just going to take a small little spidge and mix that in. And you can see, although they're both white, I'm using the same amounts. I get 2 different tones. Now if I wanted to take that up to the same tone as this, add more white, and then immediately that gets, oh, it's almost right, it's almost right. So I'm just trying to figure out, what that blue looks like as opposed to this one. This one's got a slightly richer, warmer feel to it, which is nicer. So already I know maybe that white is too white. It's really subtle, and I don't know whether the camera is going to pick up the subtlety in it, but this has got a slightly more purpleness to it, which is slightly warmer, and this is slightly cooler. I could use a combination of both of them when I come down to really refining edges and shapes and tones and things. But to start off with, I have a liking more for that one. Again, I'm going to use a little bit of this blue that we took from our mix here. Scoop that up, put that down here. Each time doing this, by the way, I'm rubbing my trowel on a piece of paper, not on a bit of cloth, but just to keep it nice and clean so I'm not cross-contaminating. And if you get used to that as a practice, it becomes a lot easier. This is like a Naples yellow, which might give it a slightly green colour. So what I'm going to do is, that might be too yellow, so I'm going to whiten that down before adding it to that. I'm going to take up some of that warmer yellow, because out of the two, sorry, warmer white, because out of the two I like this one. So immediately it takes it down way past that intense yellow. No, comparatively intense, because that's like cadmium yellow, that's like really, really yellow. So this Naples yellow is a very, very soft, subtle yellow. I mix it with a warm white and I get this very sort of creamy looking colour. So this is the colour that I'm now going to mix with that blue. So I don't need to use all of that, so I'm just going to add a little bit of a touch to it here. And mix these two together. And just to see comparatively how that works. Now it's still the same blue. I mix in 2 whites and 1 Naples yellow to that one blue, and I've got 3 different versions of it on my palette. So it gives you then a palette of light blues to work from, and I could do that with virtually every colour that I have here, and the combinations of all of those things put together can really build like a rainbow of colour that you can pick and choose to use. But you know, that's okay-ish. But to go from there to there, there's other colours that I need to bring into it. I think there's a slight greeniness to some of it that I'd like, so what I might do is take some of that blue. Now, out of the two, this is very flat looking, and this is a bit more warmer. I actually like that lighter tone blue. Now this isn't the base colour of the armour. That would be the darker tones that I would want to build in maybe here, because I've got that slight browniness to them. But it's got a slight touch of green in certain points as well, greens and yellows. So to a blue you would add a yellow to make it green. So I'm going to try using some of this yellow ochre. Again, I'm not going to use an awful lot of it, just add a little bit at a time and just see how it changes the flow or feel of that. See, I didn't need to use an awful lot there to really change it, to make it have that green kind of feel to it. But totally I want them to work together, so I can't go. You can see how that works. You see how that works against this one. Might be still too yellow, so I can nip back in. And take that down. Just want a sort of greeny touch to it. People write little notebooks to themselves about what colours are mixed together to get certain tones and hues and things. That might be quite good. It's got a slight khaki-ness to it. It's more of a greyish feel, which is quite nice. I might see if I can add some of that warmer white to that as well. To get a lighter version of it. So let's just set that beside it. We'll start to see how these colours are going to sit together. This is the base that I'm building up. So this is the blue itself. I think some browns in there that I wanted to pull out as well. So go to that umber again. Go back to my blue. Mix those together. And that brown has a slight yellowiness to it, so it might tinge it slightly green. So going into the highlights where that browns, blues and greeniness start to build up. Just really sort of playing around, figuring out what works. Starting to add a nice kind of contrast. That might be, I'll try a little touch of that Naples yellow in there, because I don't want it to be quite such a harsh change. I mean, tonally from there to, let's see that. So tonally from there to here, it's like a there's quite a few steps in between them, but it's kind of like I'm taking it on a stepping stone, getting it into the lights, and some of the lights have a slightly sort of cooler look to them. I might actually add some more yellow, so this warm yellow, to this colour, to see how light I can get that. So it's got a very sort of mattish grey colour to it, but it's slightly warmer. Because we've added the yellow ochre to that blue mix, it got a slightly greeny brown feel, with a bit of the burnt umber. Adding some of the warm white to that made it sort of a greenish colour, and adding some more warm white to that colour gave me this sort of warmer green, or sort of warmer browny colour, grey brown. That beside the green is a lot cooler, so you can see how there's more colour in that, there's more pigment, there's more saturation, and this isn't. But I think using more of that warm white on there, in my highlights, I don't really want to get any lighter than that, which is a lot warmer in its feel than this titanium white in the background. You can see that. Just wait for the cameras to catch up so I can see it. So obviously they're waiting on 3 different screens to catch up to themselves, and YouTube is about a 30-second delay. You have to wait. Alex, you're asking, you presume mixed paint gives a good coverage, judging by the size of the mixed smears versus big dollops of constituted colours. Mixed quality seems very low. Yeah, I'm not. Certainly, I'm working on a smallish area today, and I'm kind of playing around with that sense of discovery about what works and doesn't work. So I don't want to slap paint all over it and then go, "Oh, it's the wrong colour." Now I'll repaint over the whole lot of it. I'm better off working in a small area first, just to kind of find that discovery out. A lot more painters are much more intuitive and knowledgeable than I am when it comes to colour and the paints that they use, because I paint on a more regular basis, and they will instinctively know through having done it already what works for them in certain aspects of painting things and rendering things, so they won't necessarily have to go through this level of kind of discovery. But I quite like and enjoy this part of the process, because it starts to get you used to seeing the colours and how they work well together and what doesn't work together. and then building them up first. So for me, this is kind of the fun part of painting, where you are literally playing around with your colours and how they're going to sit. When you pull that up to the canvas itself, it's really light. I just scoop that back a bit and I'll show you. So when I pop this up, this is that grey, and put it beside it, you can see how light it is. So I know if that's my lightest light on that armour, I then know I've got a grey to work from my dark blue on my palette, which is down here. I then know, going from my little walkabout journey and mixing colours, going from that dark blue to that dark light, I've got like a stepping stone effect of how I can get there. These browns and greens and blues, and you know, there's a tonality to them that kind of takes you there. I might want to play around with this blue a little bit, maybe to get a mid-tone range, because between that and here, that 3-step, there might be other steps I want to kind of try and look at. So if I add that white back there, so I've got that white from here. I might take just a touch of my original blue and pop that back in and darken that down. That's very grey, but that's a nice step there. I might take another section of this and add a little bit more to it. And funny enough, because I've gone through these steps and I've obviously added different paints along the way, then it's got a more browny look to it. This is starting to look darker than that original blue. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take some of this original blue I had, I think tonally the vibrancy in that colour is lovely. It's very strong. That's a lot colder. It's slightly, well, is it colder? Slightly got a warmer reddish feel to it. You can see how these are starting to work. I think I need to go darker, so I might add a bit of this, the burnt umber mix to that with a bit more of the blue. See what that does. And there's nothing wrong in adding more intensity to it at that point, which is nice. It's got a nice darkness to it. But if I want it slightly bluer, I might just take a small squidge of that phthalo blue and just add a little bit, just add some intensity to the colour, and that's quite nice as a tone. So as a tonal step, I can start to see how I can go from my original blue through my darks, you know, I can go for my dark and step it up into lots of different areas, because that's what this is going to need. It's going to need areas to go from light to dark. Yep, there you go. So I'm going to need to go from light to dark in different areas with different reflections. So I need flexibility of it, and as I start to paint it, I can fine tune it by adding some of those other elements that I've now got on my palette. So I know to use the warm white as opposed to the titanium white, and if to add that little bit of green, I'm going to use some of the yellow ochre. If I just want to go straight from the blue to add sort of a really dark richer brown, I can use some of the burnt umber into that blue. That blue is made up of sort of several elements of using that alizarin crimson, phthalo blue and the ultramarine blue mixed together to give me this dark blackness bluey blackness that I wanted. So I'm teaching myself at this stage that this colour here that I've now got on my brush is the darkest dark blue, and I can go to my reference and think about how that actually works. This is the lightest area. As it goes around over the edge, it's going to get darker, but also around these areas it's going to get darker. So as I start to lightly layer these in, I'm not going to, because there's colour down on the palette already, I'm just going to lightly lay that darkness in, and about how that curves around. It doesn't come right up to the edge. I've got to think about or imagine the curved nature of the folds in that metal, how that kind of, it's capturing more light here, but it might give a suggestion as it comes down into this corner it gets slightly darker, just as a hint. I like some of the reddishness in this background, because as opposed to the background itself, which is a very sort of dark blacky brown colour, a slightly more purpley feel around there. Maybe touches and nuances of it up here as well. Again, just use my cloth. I've got too much paint on there, I'm just going to take that off. I'm going to slightly lighten that up with this kind of next stage blue that we had. It still looks quite dark on there, but see when it goes on next to it how light that is. Just contouring, just finding the edges of where that shoulder's going to go. Slightly darker over this point and slightly darker down here. So I'm really constructing the three-dimensionality of it. I think I might want to come to the next stage of light maybe a little bit sooner. I think I can go back into these and darken them down further. I just want to see the stages going into the light. Go back to that. Lighter blue. That to me is too strong. Put it on there. And again, this is going to be down to the resolution of your screens, the resolution of my camera, the whole thing. So you're going to be sat right in front of your canvas, so you're going to be able to see it a lot better. Imagine some of that blue I've just done to the more of a greenish colour that I had before that's on my palette. Get a greeny, slightly lighter version of that. That's better. Going to go back into this with that darker browner colour and just darken these up. I think this needs to be darker on here. very light green. I'm just going to take that across the edge of that. The edge of that blue. Just a little smidge on that side. And when I'm mixing that light, very light green to that blue and blending it in, but when I'm mixing the same light green into that blue on the paint, on the canvas, you can see it's slightly tonally darker. And then go into that sort of light area that I had on there. You can see how totally light that is. So I'll go back down. So I'm using that little bit of light green mixed with that very greyish white. So it becomes like a tonal step. I'm just using that to soften the brush marks in between. So I've got like an element there of going from my lights to my darks. I'm going to lightly brush over the whole section. This is a bit, for me, a bit like you know, getting a kitchen towel and just softening your drawing before you start to render the tones of it all. This is a similar thing where I'm using the colours that I've started to build up in the foam and just seeing how they kind of blend into each other. It kind of knocks them back a little bit, and then I can build up on top of that. But I start to see how either the shape needs to be filled more out the front here, maybe darker down here. Some nice little details of lighter yellows and greens that start kind of where it starts to break from this white to the darks. My dark is a slightly more browner blue. These greens just sort of help that kind of visual transition. It's really subtle, but that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at that. You know, this steel blue armor isn't blue. It's made of lots of colours. At the minute, it looks particularly white and greyish on your screen. With my screen, with my eyes right in front of me, I know this needs to be a little bit richer and darker, but it's not quite so greyish looking. It's a bit dark in certain areas. I can redefine some of those highlights and go back into them to make them more powerful, but I want to build up some of the strength. So it's that give and take process. I'm actually going to add a little touch of that alizarin crimson to that red. Sorry, the dark brown colour I had. A touch more of the very dark blue that I originally set off with, just to see what that does. These dark areas. That breaks as well. Now, whereas it goes over the top of that shoulder, it may catch some light from here as well. When it comes down here, it's going to be a lot darker because it's almost gone around and away from the light. And the same down here, and maybe a small touch of with that happening along that bottom edge. Now this is the colour that I'm using for these darker areas. Let's see that a little bit of brown mixed with the blue the brown has a slight yellowiness to it, so it gives a slight greeny feel to it. So if I want to intensify it, I might need to add some of that phthalo blue and knock that greeniness back, but build up the depth and the darkness. Now I transition that into the light. So it goes around the back of this, it's going to be a lot darker. I'm trying to alleviate any brush strokes that I've got, so I'm using thinner applications paint. I'm not going in with heavy impasto paint, I'm kind of thinning it out. I'm just building the layers up lightly because I want it to have a real kind of soft quietness to the paint, and I don't want it to have overly bold marks. I want them to be really subtle. I want to kind of just the illusion of her standing in a suit of armour to be kind of totally natural. And what that's doing is the paint is starting to build a reflective nature to the illusion of so I'm pulling these darks into this blue area just to tone it down a little bit. This is some really light brush strokes, so it's about layering up your mark making and your paint to give you the illusion of something that's turning in shape and space. But it's quite playful. I mean, I'm total control of this image because it doesn't exist. So I can set the rules to it, but these rules are based on maybe how light works. If you're trying to build a believable image of something like a suit of armor that doesn't exist, it's still going to be a suit of armor. It's got a metallic feel to it, so you want it to have a certain reflective quality to it. You want to see how the colors will work with that. I don't want it to look like a daffodil, so it's not going to be like a soft yellow petal. It's got to be like a metallic hard shape. So I've got to build in that crispness to the shape of it, the form, but also how light's going to go across that form. It's not polished, so it's not like a glassy plate. It's a slight matte sheen, if you like. So I've got to think about that. And so little tiny nuances of just knocking where it's really sort of too white. I need to knock back a little bit. But I'm literally taking little tiny slithers of that blue for a journey through all of these tones that I've put there already, and it just building the qualities up in that shoulder. I still might do a bit more to that as well, but that's what I'm going to kind of play with as well. And it is playful, it's kind of fun. There's areas of this kind of ridge which won't necessarily be all bright white as a reflective nature. As I say, as it comes around here, if this is where the highlight is, I get a sense of where the direction's coming from, and that direction's got to flow into the rest of my portrait as well. So I'll zoom out a little bit. Zoom out a little bit. As you start to see that sheen, you know, to me, at the moment, it's like a Belisha beacon. It looks like it's completely separate to the rest of it. But I've got to think about the light and how the light's come from this direction, striking that shoulder. It's got to come from this direction and strike that face. And it's got to come from this direction and hit the the hands and hit the orangutan. So there's a consistency of light throughout the picture. So when I start mixing up different colours, I use the same approach. You go by using a colour white base to begin with, going from lights to darks, and then maybe seeing what other colours are involved with it. I get a sense when I put the lights down, it's got to have the same light source direction. Now, illusionary wise, I can play around with certain things. I might have a sense of illumination coming from the orangutan that it lights up a space around it that has a luminescence to it that doesn't exist in reality, but imaginatively in a concept, this might become a kind of source of light as well. So there might be an element of uplighting, so I might be adding another element of a light source there, but that's the imagination playing. That's where you're getting to figure out, what works, what doesn't work. Is that right? Does that look good? Do I need to knock that back a bit? And the flexibility of oil paints means you can do that. And it's no different from how you'd work with pencils for building up the illusionary elements of, if I drew this in pencil, what type of pencil mark do I need? What type of tone do I need? How to get that transition between light and dark when I do the face? If this is illuminating, if this orangutan, I might have a slight glow from it, which might reflect into this area here. That this might be lighter, whereas if this was the only light source, this area might be darker. So you've got to think about those types of things. How do your elements fit together? Just got to take a quick break for 1 second. So I'm going to stick you on that. I think I've still got it on from last week. The little time lapse I did of my rewrite back of Nicola Coughlin. I'll have my time lapse of Clive Murray next week for you, and hopefully the one I'll be doing this week. But yeah, I'll be back in 2 seconds. Bear with us 1 second. Right, I'm back. I should have changed the description on that little time lapse to I've gone to clean my brushes or something, because sharpening my pencils doesn't make sense when I'm painting today. But I think you can get to start to see what I'm talking about, how I am making one. This starts to feel a bit more solid. It starts to get that it's got a certain shape to it. I can build on it from there because I'm working in oil paints. I can work on now the rest of the painting and build that metallic nature up to the suit of armour. I think sort of greying certain areas down, maybe not having that highlight quite so light, quite so sheeny. Now I know in my reference the highlights on here are very strong and very crisp in areas, and there's a stronger stark contrast between the lightest light and the dark bit. You can see that the light is really striking and the dark is really striking. So I can build in some of the strengths in my dark, which might dictate that to me right now this feels a little bit too light, but if I start to build in these darks a little bit, I might find that light is probably right. So it's a bit of trial and error, and I want to make sure that I get those qualities right and that I know what they are for the picture before I start to move on and try and get them to be all over the painting, if you know what I mean. Let's make sure everybody's still with us. So again, if you're watching for any if you're watching live on Facebook or Twitch or YouTube, if you want to ask any questions, you can do. It's all about sharing the information. If you know of a technique which I am not aware of and I should know, by all means teach me as well. It's kind of a two-way process, or artists you think might be interesting for me to look at for my painting that I'm working on. I'm more than happy to look at those as well. It's a good way of learning your painting is by researching and finding out about lots of artists, and I can't possibly have known all of the artists and all of art history. So it's a case of, if you know somebody that you think, oh, that might really be really helpful, stick it down in the chat. More than happy to kind of pick up new bits of information. I'm just going to put a couple of touches of real tonal differences here, almost around the edge of this. As I say, I want the edges to kind of disappear into the background of it, so become a lot softer, because it's going to be dark on the other side. It's just a little peeking out of darkness over the edge. Let me introduce that just underneath this bit as well. This is going to be particularly dark underneath here, because this bit sits over the top of this bit, if you know what I mean. So I'm giving myself little indications about how this is actually working as forms as well. So I think there'll be a slight reflection of this orangutan here, so this is going to be slightly more orangey. So this is where these orangey browns start to pop back in, but I want to get the blues right, so I'll be using the same blues as that for this, because it's in the same kind of location and it's the same type of material. But I just want to see the transition of darks as well. A slight curve. It kind of goes in that way and then back out and around the shoulder and then back in over and then back up. So here might catch some light, which might need to lighten up a little bit. Here might catch some light. Here it's a little bit darker because it's flatter. The light isn't striking it straight on. So bring this light down and around, and I've got like a a rolled edge, if you like, that goes right around this bit and this bit, but this curves right around. You've got to imagine this goes right around the back of the arm as well. So if the highlight is striking it here, here's where the highlight's going to be. This needs to be a little bit darker. Highlight comes around and darkens as it comes to here. Now, the illuminatory effect of this might be slightly orangey, so be aware of that. As it goes up here, it's going to be a little bit darker. Where this shoulder comes, it's going to be darker there, dark there as well. I'll catch a bit of the light there. It'll be lighter here and darker on this side, so that's slightly darker on this edge. It's kind of like a scalloped kind of feel to this breastplate. Now, nobody told me to do this. Nobody said, oh, just do the breastplate in one sheet of metal. I just think visually it was kind of interesting. It kind of led you down to this kind of heart shape and the heart that he's got for the orangutan. All of these things don't necessarily mean anything to anybody else other than me and Carly, who I had a conversation with, and certain elements I wanted to build into the picture. So I've made those choices. I've made those choices to have a certain kind of feel and flow to them. That kind of scalloped nature. So it comes up here. These are slightly different scallop shapes, so this is slightly darker behind here. I've got to think about the undulations of these things, about how they kind of flow. So I'm imagining what they would look like in my head, what shapes they are, but I've got to keep to their truth. If I am just putting the paint down and go, well, that's what I imagined it to be, as an excuse, it will start to fall down fairly quickly visually. I've got to try and make them believe that this is still the same material as this, that this kind of flows around the shape of this. So we go back in and putting some of those blues in as well. Now that I'm quite happy about how I get the blue. Like little touches of green in there. See some, woo. Well, that's the other tip. Make sure you've got your that was my mile stick. Make sure you got your painting firmly secured to your board. So it's added a new element to it. Luckily enough, it just caught the edge of the painting medium, which is quite thinner, so I can quickly like dab this off. I might have to let that bit dry now. See, because I had the two drawings on there earlier on, I just thought, oh, I'll just take the drawings off and just put it back on the board, it'll be fine. I kind of have to wait for that painting medium to kind of dry off now a little bit on this area of the painting, so I can't work on that. You can get a process called oiling out, because I build up the layers quite thinly. So you build fat over lean in painting, that you use a thicker, heavier paint as you build up your layers. Because it's very thick and you're trying to do a thin film over the top of it. Thin film dries quicker than the fat layer and it starts to crack, and all the rest of it for longevity. And consistency wise it doesn't look great as well. Dab that back a little bit. So yeah, I've got a lovely splodge just on the hair. luckily enough, this isn't a finished painting because I'll be really frustrated with myself. This is just teaching me, again, don't do what I do. Do what I say. Make sure your painting's nicely secured. But at the minute, it's just kind of resting on the bar of the drawing board. But I'm just aware now this has got a saturation of. Just lucky enough, it sort of catapulted the painting medium over it, just along the lower section. So I won't work on that today. I'll let that dry out. So maybe work on this bluiness coming in. I was just about to work on the lighter touch of this. So I'm thinking about how the light is hitting this, where that light maybe catches the rim on that side. So figuring out what these armor bits were for. So this is more that would be historically, I think it's not 100% historically, but historically that would be to protect sort of sideways chops coming in. So normally these would be really high, like the little flares added to the shoulder element of the armor to stop sideward blows of a sword coming in. That will protect the head and face. So it'll catch this edge as well. I think there's a lovely sculptural element to oil painting, that you can sort of get your hands and get cloth in and just really clean up edges and things. Now technically that's probably not what they teach in their schools, but something I quite like. So we'll see how that works as a soften some of those little strokes there. Just try to widen out that highlight a little bit, because I think it's a little bit too harsh there. So I'm taking quite a lot of the paint off. I haven't changed the colour, but I just took the paint off and I'm dragging now that paint through that kind of riveted section. As it comes down there, it gets a little bit darker. It's got a darker bit up here, a lighter bit. Just try and blend that into the darkness a little bit so it's not quite so stark. So this is really sculpting the form of this piece of arm going around the top. So I don't know if anybody's had a go at doing the sky portraits yet, or if you've been watching it. But I was watching Grayson Perry last night. It was quite interesting. It's on Channel 4. He's got a weekly challenge going on. And there was a great little video by Banksy who had created one of his great artworks on the walls of an HMS prison, which I thought was brilliant. So if you haven't seen that, check out Channel 4, see if you can watch it. It's called Grayson's, I think it's Art School or something? It was Grayson Perry anyway, you'll find it on their website. That's Channel 4 in the UK if you're watching from abroad. So this is really just pulling the dark that's already there. I've used very little paint here. I do think I need to go lighter up here though. Big splodge of medium that's been splashed on my palette. That's way too light. So yeah, just think about how that is going to capture the light, similar to this. Because it's coming from this direction, so as this travels over, it gets darker, but then gets lighter here. This comes darker. Not so light here because it's kind of, as it's coming down, it might capture a little bit of light around there, but then as this comes around this side, it gets darker. So I'm constantly thinking about the form of something, how the light travels around and down. So yeah, it's going to do that. It's going to be lighter here, so that transitions over. kind of using these strokes in a directional sense to again give me the illusion of the paint strokes are working with the form. A little bit of light there. So it comes away from the light, it's darker, but it will catch the light as it's hitting the rim of the shoulder pad. I'm just angling my strokes to kind of flow with the form. And just widening that highlight out a little bit. It's that yellowy greyish green colour. So these these paintbrush strokes that I'm using will be hardly red when you look at the painting from a distance, but they're kind of sculpturally helping to give the illusion that there's a form that moves around as well. And I'm just going to take it right through that highlight just to soften it a little bit. I'm going to move that highlight over a little bit, so the highlight's slightly more coming from that direction, not necessarily that direction. Just lightly going over the surface of that. this bit where it sort of disappears into the background, there is just like a slight tonal difference between these two areas in colour wise, but I don't want it to be crisp because I don't want it to look like she's being cut out and stuck on a dark background. I want it to believe that the background is there and she's in it, and therefore light kind of softens as it goes into the dark shadows, so you don't quite see crisp, dark, sharp edges. You can just get a small nuance of the object itself, which is this metal shoulder pad. I'm sure it's got a technical name for it. So that's how you can kind of play around with colours and change shapes and have just total creative imagination and freedom to do whatever you want to do. And then you can build those elements up in your work. It's playful, you can take your time with it. You need to set your own guides as to what it is you're going to do and what it is you want it to be, and that'll help you find them rather than going, oh, it's too dark, oh, but it'll do. You know, trying to get the element that you're trying to achieve is the illusion of a metal shoulder pad, so I've got to create the illusionary element of what this metal shoulder pad looks like and what it does in the light and how the light's going to set it. If we just type making things up, every bit of different bit of armor will have different rules to it, and it won't look all cohesive. As I've worked out some of the things for this one, I can then adapt them for these as it goes around, but it'll keep to a core of what this is about. I can just pick out remember that highlight that I was talking about. I've kind of darkened that down, but I'm shifting it slightly across a little bit. Just using a little dry brush just to lighten, broaden this area. So, but the highlight was quite thin, and I'm bringing it around here a little bit more, so it stays a little bit more on this side, coming more this direction than that direction, because of the highlight I want on her face. I don't want it necessarily to be this side of her face is dark, so I'm bringing it around a little bit forward so this is more fully in light. Just softening it a little bit as well. These like little tiny dabby motions are quite nice because it gives like it's been hammered. So again, mark making is important because it can add to the believability of your subject. So if you've got any art related questions, shoulder looking good and popping off the canvas. Thank you very much, Alex. Appreciate that over on YouTube. But yeah, it's amazing how quickly has it's gone from this, which is quite flat and a bit dull, to something that is a little bit more alive. I'm just seeing things that I can sort of tweak a little bit in there from the highlight being a little bit too strong on that side. This is where the highest light's going to be here. Because it's the closest part to the light source. change that light over there a little bit, and definitely catch that a little bit lighter as well. That's going to be darker up there, because it's getting away from the light source. There's a transition from there. I catch a little bit of light just underneath there. So use those directional strokes to begin with, just to help me give the kind of flow of colour. I'm using a kind of a dabbing effect to give me a textural quality to the paint, to give me kind of like a slightly hammered feel of these. Like the more affluent you were, the more highly polished and smooth the surface would be. Alex, you're asking, so would you call the painting before you'd started today an underpainting? Yeah, but basically you can go like an underpainting. You can have a grisaille. The underpainting is like the drawing of the elements in your picture. You can block out some basic tonal differences, like the grisaille palette, which is quite grey, does a grainal tonal painting of your work first, and then you do your first colour pass, and then you do a second colour pass, and a third or fourth, fifth, whatever it takes to get the painting finished. But definitely the initial one that I did was definitely a drawing, and then the second one was just a filling in and out of drawing. So I think this would be classed sort of midway through. It's not finessed yet, because not until I do the entirety would I then go back the whole lot and retune the picture. So it'll be a second pass after that. So this is just like the first painting, and building it up that way. That's why paintings can take some time to kind of work out. It's not always about speed and how quickly you're producing an artwork. Sometimes you need to take time doing it, and then you need to reflect on it, because you've got to wait for the paint layer to dry. That's what I quite like about painting. It makes you slow down sometimes. I'm just looking at how these little light areas maybe come across to even further. And every painter paints slightly differently as well. I've seen people who they'll load up a big fat brush and just go, that's it, and that's all I want to do with it. I'll spend the detail around the detailed areas, but I'll just suggest everything with big bold strokes, and beautiful work. You know, just because I'm working on like this for myself on this picture, it's just the flavour of what I want to build up in the imagery in this. It's going to be slightly different to that process, but it's not to say that process is wrong, it's just different. There are loads of different processes, and you've got to kind of figure out flavour wise what it is that most interests you, and try to emulate some of those qualities and play around and experiment, using those as a guide. That's what's interesting about painting. Your little experimentations will deliver something unique. So though you're using maybe another reference from another artist as a starting off, doesn't mean to say you're copying that person. You're just using their their process or method as a source of inspiration to help guide you develop your work that way. But go and have a look at lots of other artwork. There seems to be this kind of like, I have to be unique, and therefore I can't know about anything else, and I've got to just do it by myself. And there is a great sense of discovery, but you will learn and discover more by looking at other artists, and it will help inform your painting a lot quicker. So I think I'm getting quite happy with kind of that textural element we're starting to build in, but also the tonal shift of that more metallic, slightly darker bluey. No, it looks whiter, but I haven't, as you saw in the palette, I used the warm white to mix with the paint to make a very, very light version of the blue that I had. But you can see the base of the blue that I started off with was quite dark, and it has appeared in here. But as you tone and blend it in, I've created the illusion of a shape that's solid and moves across the form. So that's something I can take forward into the rest of this painting now. And I might get to a stage where I look back and go, you know what, all of those highlights are way too strong, they all need to be toned down. And I can just go back over it again and tone it down. It's not that I have to paint up to the same level, I just use a thin solution of paint and medium to kind of lightly wash over to have a translucency to it, which can tonally take the whole thing down. I can scumble over it, I can to make it a little bit solid and chalky-ish, or glaze to allow the colours to come through, but just to take them down a different hue. So if you think about hue as in your dial going from sort of orange reds, greeny blues, you know, which hue do you want? I want a bluey one. Okay, go to the bluey one. As you look at it, as you stand back and look at it, go, it's all a little bit cold still, I need to warm it up. So just tweak up the temperature on it and warm it up a little bit. So it's about standing back and going, yeah, what do I need? Do I need to turn that dial up or down on that colour? Do I need to turn the brightness up or turn it, get more of a contrast? Or do I need to be more softer and faded and muted? They're all answers that you answer as an artist, but playing with your mediums is a good way of doing it. Actively doing the painting, you know, seeing what works, what doesn't work, is a good way of doing it. But researching is another way of doing it, because it can save you an awful lot of time on the canvas. You know, if you've got a certain palette that you like in other people's work, maybe why not do your paintings in that palette? Try that out, and it'll save you so much time painting with loads of paints that aren't going to work for you. So it's just about working a little bit smarter and not necessarily harder, but it should be a more enjoyable process. As I said before, try and keep your painting secure to your easel and not drop it like I did, because you will have accidents like just knocking your painting medium all over the place. So hopefully that today was informative, a little bit different than the pencils we're working on. Might carry on with this next week and see how we go from there. But if you have any questions at all, any art related questions, you can always get them ready for next week and stick them down. They say you might have learnt a different process somewhere else, so to say it's wrong. This is just the way I've kind of looked at painting myself and what I'm slowly starting to develop. And it will change over the years, I'm sure it will, because it will keep painting alive for me. But technically, if there's things that you want to know how to do better, or issues you're having with your paints, let's talk about them. But for now, that's as much as I'm going to do for today, because we've hit just over 4 o'clock. We're just over 2 hours. But that was fun. I enjoyed doing that today, including making the mess. I'll be doing my live stream tomorrow on Twitch for Sky Portrait Artist of the Week. So it'll be live sitting for however long it takes me to do my painting or drawing. I haven't decided yet what I'm doing. I'm actually going to wait till tomorrow until I meet or see the person. It is a lady who did a brilliant program recently called It's a Sin on television. She wrote the screenplay, I think that's who it is anyway. They did mention her briefly during this week, and so I want to kind of see what she's like and what the lighting's like and what she's got around her before I decide whether I'm going to paint, draw, or charcoal or whatever it's going to do. So it'll be kind of interesting for me tomorrow when I sit down and just watch it. I normally leave it till about about half an hour into the program before I go live. It's purely so I can get a good reference and set myself up knowing what medium I'm going to use, and then I just start. But I'll stream that on my Twitch, and I'll try and make a time lapse ready for you next week. But I will finish off doing the time lapse of last week's and pop it up on Instagram today at some stage, so it'll go through all the other social media platforms that I'm on. So yes, thank you very much indeed. Good fun today, really enjoyed it. Michael, thank you very much indeed. Hope your portrait goes well. Yeah, and if you can, watch the Sky Portrait Artist of the Year as well, just to listen to how the artists are talking about the painting processes and things. You might not like it, you might not disagree with it. I think you might enjoy it. But until then, have fun and keep painting, keep